During the holiday season, we are always explained, shown, and told that it is important to be with family. We go out of our way to show more kindness and patience towards others. But for one family in 1929, Christmas Day would bring a horror so terrible that people still talk about it today. On this episode of America's Haunted History, we explore the Lawson family murders. The Lawson family was no different from any other family of the time. A hardworking tobacco farmer, Charlie Lawson, was born in Lawsonville, North Carolina on May 10, 1886. His wife, Fanny Manring, was born October 13, 1892, in Stokes County, North Carolina. The couple married in 1911 and started making their own family. Their firstborn was a daughter named Marie, who came in 1912. Following Marie was Arthur in 1913, William in 1914, Carrie in 1916, Maybelle in 1922, James in 1925, Raymond in 1927, and the baby, Mary Lou, born in 1929, just 5 months before the events that would take place on Christmas Day. The Lawsons had lived and worked as tenant tobacco farmers on a couple of different tobacco farms through the years, working extremely hard to make ends meet. Life brought many challenges to the Lawson family, including the death of their son William from pneumonia in 1920, just 4 days after his birthday. Eventually, in 1927, they had saved enough money and got a substantial loan from the bank to purchase a home and farm in Germanton, North Carolina, which shortly before, Charlie's brothers had already done the same. The farm was located on Brook Cove Road, and the home itself was a very run-down cabin, which had been built over 100 years prior. The Lawsons were able to fix up the cabin as much as they could to make it livable and comfortable. Charlie even bought his wife Fanny a modern wood stove, a promise to show Fanny that he would build a brand new modern home once the loan from the bank had been paid off. Just months before the murders, Charlie was digging a ditch with a tool similar to a pickaxe. During this, he got caught on some old barbed wire, and the tool came back and hit him in the head extremely hard. This gave him a massive cut across his forehead, and he ended up with 2 black eyes with half of his face being bruised. Charlie was seen by a doctor, but shortly after his injury is when the headaches began. Fanny noticed that Charlie began acting differently. He would be up most nights, crying at the edge of the bed, complaining of debilitating headaches. Randomly throughout each day and night, Charlie would sprint out of his chair or bed to check on his guns, making sure that they were loaded and sighted in, often accusing his oldest son, Arthur, of tampering with the guns, or even using them when Charlie was away. He would get furious and start threatening his family. Over the weeks, Charlie became worse and worse. Fanny even recalled to a family member that one night she noticed Charlie wasn't in bed and nowhere to be found. She went outside and noticed her husband kneeling in the tobacco field. He was praying and crying for the pain to stop. When Fanny finally convinced Charlie to come back inside, she noticed that he had his shotgun, and it had been with him the entire time. Shortly after this event, Charlie was quoted as saying, "I wouldn't mind dying, but only if I could take my family with me." 2 weeks before the tragic events, Charlie told his family that they were going into town for a surprise. They all fit into the Ford Model T that Charlie owned and made the cold trip a few miles into Germanton. They went into a clothing store and Charlie bought himself and every member of the family a brand new outfit. This was a very unexpected purchase for a tobacco farmer in the 1920s. People noticed the massive wad of cash he pulled out of his pocket, something not even his wife had ever seen him have. He then had them stay in their new outfits and headed to a photography studio where he had a family portrait taken. The photo is now infamous in true crime lore due to what happened just a couple weeks later. On Christmas morning, there were no presents, no decorations, and no tree. Life had to continue on with farm chores. Charlie had reminded his family about the money he spent on the new clothes and the family picture, but he did say he had one more surprise later on in the day. The Lawsons' oldest daughter, Marie, who was 17, got up with her mother and started making a raisin cake to help celebrate the Christmas holiday. Charlie and his oldest son, Arthur, who was 16, went out rabbit hunting with Arthur's cousin, Odell Ashby. They spent the morning hunting rabbits until they decided to have a family-friendly shooting competition. Once they had spent all their ammunition, Arthur asked his father, Charlie, if he and Odell could borrow some of his shells. When Charlie told him no, Arthur told his father that he and Odell would head into town to buy some more. As soon as they left, Charlie decided to put his plan into action. Charlie went about 500 yards from his home to his tobacco barn. He waited on the side of the barn, knowing that two of his young daughters would be leaving soon to go wish other family members a Merry Christmas, and would have to walk right past the tobacco barn. Fanny helped her daughters, Carrie, 13, and Maybelle, 7, put on their winter coats and watched them for a minute as they walk across their land, not knowing what horror would await them. Charlie heard his daughters' voices. He was ready. He had 3 guns with him, a repeating rifle, a single-barrel shotgun, and a double-barrel shotgun. As soon as his daughters were close enough, Charlie came out from around the corner of the tobacco barn and lifted up his rifle and aimed right at Carrie. Carrie raised her hand in front of her head, but it did nothing. The bullet went right through her hand and into her head. Charlie aimed and tried to fire at Maybelle, but the gun jammed. He quickly grabbed his shotgun and fired at Maybelle, ripping a huge hole through her body, destroying part of her lungs. Charlie then noticed his girls were still moving. He went to the front of the barn, grabbed a 2x4, and smashed their heads in. He did make sure, though, not to damage their faces. Charlie Lawson then dragged both Carrie and Maybelle into the tobacco barn, placed rocks under their heads, closed their eyes, crossed their arms. Unfortunately, this would not be the end of the slaughter of the Lawson family. Charlie grabbed his shotguns and he started running the 500 yards from the barn back to his home. On the front porch, Fanny Lawson was gathering some more firewood for the wood stove. She noticed out of the corner of her eye Charlie running towards her with guns in his hands. Confused, she shouted to her husband, who she loved so much, "Charlie, what are you doing?" When Charlie got close, he pulled out his shotgun, aimed at his wife, and shot her at close range. The shot left a massive hole in her chest, destroying part of her heart. 17-year-old Marie was in the main room of the house, curling her hair. When she heard the shot come from the front porch, she jumped up and went to see what was going on. The youngest sons, James and Raymond, were actually outside with their friend Hassel Miller when they heard the shot. When Marie went to the door, she saw her father, gun in one hand, and in the other, he was dragging Fanny by the arm. The boys outside heard Marie scream and ran into the house through the back door. As Hassel Miller got into the doorway of the main room of the house, he saw Fanny's lifeless body on the floor as Marie was kneeling down, crying hysterically. Marie tried to grab a fire poker next to the fireplace, but she wasn't fast enough. By the time she got to it, Charlie had already loaded the shotgun and fired at his oldest daughter in the back. The shot was so intense, she snapped her neck as her face hit the fireplace mantle, also breaking her wrist. She lost multiple teeth as well. Hassel Miller saw the entire scene, seeing the hole straight through Marie's body. Charlie noticed Hassel and looked right at him. Hassel took right off and ran as fast as he could home. James and Raymond ran and hid from their father. While they did their best not to be seen, their cries made them easy to locate. Charlie found Raymond first behind the stove. He was able to move the stove just enough and pulled him out. He did not shoot Raymond. However, he bashed the back of his skull in, again not damaging his child's face. Charlie left Raymond's body still half under the stove. Charlie then found James under one of the beds. Though James tried to run, he was no match for his father, who bashed James's head in until he was dead. The only other living person in the home was Charlie's 5-month-old daughter, Mary Lou, who he killed too. After everything was done, Charlie took pillows from the beds and placed them under all of the heads of his family members. He closed their eyes and crossed their arms. Charlie left the home and went into a pine thicket about 300 yards away from the horror he had left behind. Arthur, the only surviving child of Charlie and Fanny Lawson, was informed while he was in town buying shells for his shotgun. By the time he got home, all he saw was a house of horrors, blood covering the walls, and an eerie silence inside. The news of the murders spread extremely fast, and a crowd of police and volunteers had to help figure out what had happened. Some wondered if Charlie Lawson had been the one to do this. This is when the crowd heard a shotgun blast come from the woods. When they went into the woods, they found Charlie Lawson's body with a gunshot to his chest, still steaming from the warm blood flowing into the cold snow. All the bodies of the Lawsons were taken to a nearby town that was more equipped with the amount of bodies that needed to be embalmed at one time. 2 days later, the Lawsons, all dressed in their new outfits Charlie had bought just 2 weeks before, were laid in their caskets, all ready to be buried in a mass grave. The baby, Mary Lou, was buried with Fanny, still holding the baby as she did in life. The funeral drew thousands of attendees from all over. Arthur, along with one of Charlie's brothers, Marion Lawson, collapsed during the beginning of the funeral and cried. Shortly after the murders, the house became a tourist attraction to try and earn money for Arthur, the only surviving son, to help pay off the remainder of the farm. People shortly after claimed that the home was haunted by the family and that the stove would burn red hot at midnight and the baby's crib would move and rock back and forth. However, this was disproved by Arthur's cousin about a year later, after Arthur asked him to check out the house with him one night. So what caused Charlie Lawson to kill his entire family? There are a few theories that people float around. One theory is that Charlie's head injury caused some sort of dementia or an altered mental state. However, his brain was taken by Johns Hopkins University and no abnormalities were found. Another, more accepted theory by this point is that Charlie Lawson had an incestuous relationship with his oldest daughter Marie and had gotten her pregnant. This comes from Charlie Lawson's niece, Stella Lawson, who claimed that one night, while Marie was spending the night at her house, Marie confided and confessed to Stella that she was pregnant with her father's baby, and that Charlie had threatened to kill her if anyone ever found out. It is also rumored that Marie told her mother Fanny just a few weeks before the murders. While we may never know the true reason why Charlie Lawson killed his wife, 6 out of his 7 kids, and himself on Christmas Day in 1929, this story will go down in history as one of the most deadly Christmases in America's haunted history.